Kia ora, good evening and welcome back. It's the fourth season of the Huddy Hui. We're here in our brand new studio and it's going to be a fantastic start to our club rugby season. Of course, round one of the Swindell Shield kicks off this weekend and our guest in this episode of the Huddy Hui hopefully will be playing in that game. Let's hope he holds together. But his story in terms of his rugby career is quite unique, particularly about around injuries, how to build back better, and what he does outside of rugby, which is quite inspirational for a lot of up-and-coming rugby players too. Our guest tonight is Petone hooker, Josh Southall. Josh, many thanks for coming on the Huddy Hui this evening and our first guest for the year. The off-season, how's your fitness, and how's Petone looking for the Swindell Shield this year?
I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Brad. Petone, I feel like we've been building well, especially in the off-season. And again, we've had a new bit of personnel with the team being swapping up due to quite a lot of forwards leaving from last year. So we're shaping up all right, and then we're sort of just working collectively, building into that round one, and then for the rest of the year. So it's exciting times, especially with a lot of the younger boys coming through from the Colts side, coming into the Premier environment. It's awesome to see them get a run around as well, because and helping out those guys as well. So yeah, it's pretty good.
And who are some of those forwards that Petone have lost in the off season?
Where do I start? I think there's Tupo, Sabonga, Gucci, Zeke. I'm not too sure what's happening with Caleb Sinclair. I know Yon's out for a wee while, so and again the list goes on and on. But I'm not really too sure. But we're sort of just focused with what we have at the moment, and it's pretty exciting.
And your rugby journey, Josh, it's quite unique, but we'll start right back at the beginning. How did you get involved in rugby, and how did it all work out for you?
I started when I was like 5, I think. So sort of just went through junior with Upper Hutt Rugby Club, and then left there, and then ended up at St. Pat Silverstream, and then played my school years throughout there from 9 to 13, and then left. And now I went to Rams for a year, Upper Hutt Rams for 1 year, and then I left and then went to Petone, and then I've been there ever since.
And why the change from the Rams and Petone?
I think there was a lot of things that were going on around the Rams culture back then. I'm sure it's changed now. I was just coming out of college, and I just wanted to play a bit of rugby, and I understood there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I didn't, but it's probably completely different now, so I'm not bagging them whatsoever. And it looks like they're fronting up for a good year as well. So for me personally, I just shifted there, pretty much because there wasn't any coaches that was there the following year for the Rams, and I just wanted a bit of certainty around that. So
2017 was the first time in 7 years that Silverstream First 15 had won the Premier title, but also was the fact that it started a bit of a strong legacy. And in that 2017 team, you achieved what is effectively known as the Grand Slam. Tell us about the Grand Slam, and tell us about that winning moment, winning the title when you earned that turnover in the 70th minute against Wellington College.
To be honest, mate, I don't have any memory of that turnover whatsoever. To be honest, if that feels, how many years ago was that? It was quite a long time. So to be honest, mate, I can't really, I just remember, like it was an awesome feeling, a great group of lads. And it was good to be a part of. However, mate, I can't really remember the specifics of those details. They were good. What's that, 6-7 years?
Yeah.
But yeah. It does, the Grand Slam within St. Pat Silverstream does mean a lot to the college, and especially for the rest of the college and the younger boys, seeing that, that's something they would aspire to, like I did with going through the ranks as well. So, yeah.
2018, you the previous year made New Zealand secondary school boys, massive achievement. Your year 13 year is looking promising, and then all of a sudden your season's over. Tell us what happened.
Well, believe it or not, it was in a game of warm-up touch in pre-season, and I tried to step one of the front rowers because I was loose forward at the time. And I tried to step one of the front rowers and tore my ACL, did the meniscus as well, and then MCL and whatever else. So that put me out for probably a good 15 months by the time I had surgery, waiting for it, and then the recovery and return to play. So it's been that was an interesting journey. That was the first of many, to say the least.
And of course, that journey, you were noted in the blue and white as not having played for the first 15, but you were noted for your resilience and discipline to bounce back from that injury. What did that involve physically and mentally to recover from a pretty major injury like that?
Well, to be honest, Brad, going from, rugby's all you knew, especially when you're going through college, there's not many boys essentially that do have a sort of significant injury, because most of the time they sort of sit on a physio table just saying why their thumb's a bit sore or, and I've got that sort of injury there. So it is a little bit different in terms of, your rehab time, and especially like that's their final year. So it's just two different paths. For me, I just look at sort of every injury now that sort of everything happens for a reason. For me to end up where I am today, all of these injuries, if they didn't happen, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today. So that's why, like, whenever I do pick up a future injury or something like that, I'm not, yes, you can be gutted, and yes, it is part of the sport, but like, I understand that it does happen for a reason, although it is probably disguised at the time. So, yeah.
And of course, you were very much lucky that the Wellington Academy, which you were part of at the time, kept you on board and looked after you. Tell us about that Wellington Rugby Academy, because it's produced some pretty special players over the years.
Yeah, honestly, it was awesome. Especially having, the Wellington staff in charge of, all the physios that I saw that came and go over the years. But the one trainer there that was really awesome was Joel Marshall. He's been, great for me in terms of those early years of my development. So, and the academy was hosted at Rugby League Park. And it was a good training facility and a lot of knowledge there, and good camaraderie. So, yeah.
Your coach in the first 15 was Tim Mannix, who's now the director of rugby at Silverstream. Tell us about Tim and his influence and how your rugby career is shaped up from secondary school.
Yeah, I mean, he was awesome at St. Pat Silverstream for the 3 years I was in there, in the first 15. So, the way his good communication skills, and of course I do have a little bit to do with him now because I am involved with St. Pat's College Silverstream with their sort of strength and conditioning and just running their rugby program essentially through that. So yeah, I'd have a lot to do with Tim at the moment. I have a lot of respect for him. So yeah, mate.
Of course, 2020, you had a few niggles, and then you got to a North semi-final, and your knee went again. How guttering was that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of injuries in between that one too.
You could write a novel about them. Yeah.
To be honest, mate, ACC will love me. No, so I think that was my second game back. But I think that was a 16-month rehab process. That one there, like once you have one surgery, it doesn't feel the same. When you have two surgeries, it's even further. Like, it doesn't really feel the same. So, the most important thing for me was just trying to nail a little bit of the recovery stuff. But you can only do what your body is allowing you to do, because there are a lot of restrictions through that injury rehab process. And if you rush it, you'll probably take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, sort of thing. So it's important to just stay by the guidelines and not necessarily like put a target on your return to play, because that's when you start hitting these mental milestones where it's really important to just, when it happens, it'll happen, in terms of coming back rather than trying to force it, because that's when I've personally noticed that there's another injury around the corner if you rush something. So yeah. And
last year you made the decision to change from being a flanker to being a hooker. Explain to us the change. Was it injury related, and what did you have to do to your playing style to adapt being a hooker?
To be honest, mate, I had no idea anything about hooker. Like nothing. I didn't even know what side they put the ball in. So I was that fresh to actually the hooker role, essentially. But going from that one position to another. I can't necessarily take credit for that myself in terms of like my development, because, there's been a number of people and a number of teams that have actually helped me out with that development. So yeah.
And what's it taken for you in particular to learn how to be a hooker? Is it learning a whole new skill set? Have you had to change the way in which you physically are to play in the front row?
I can tell you'll probably need a lot more neck strength. That's the first thing I found out very quickly. And then also trying to protect your back as well. So, I was pretty fortunate in that favor due to, going for a lot of the balls at the breakdown. So I would take a few collisions there on the back. But in terms of my playing style, I'm just trying to implicate the 7 role into the hooker role, and sort of do my best in that department. But again, as things go along, you're still learning things as I'm going. And I think if I do play this weekend, that'll be my 10th game at Petone. So what's that, like 5 years or 4 years or something?
Yeah,
so,
4 years.
So looking forward to it.
And of course, the Jubilee Cup final last year, which of course this Saturday's game's a repeat of. But you're on the bench named as a hooker, but then you had to come on as flanker because Jacob Gooch did his shoulder. So how is it that you've spent that most of the year adapting to a change in hooker, then you have to flick back into your old position?
Oh, well, to be honest, I'm pretty comfortable with my old position, and I enjoy the new challenge of hooker as well. Because I feel like I can revert back to 7 because I've played that for all of my career. So I feel like I'm pretty comfortable within that. If this, the decision or they do need to pull trigger and put me back into 7, then I feel comfortable there. So yeah.
And of course, your role as a flanker, you said you wanted to bring that into being a hooker. Does the role of how Dane Cole's changed the game of being a hooker have influenced the way in which you play?
Well, I aspire to up to him regardless. But in terms of when I look at the hooker role, I was always a 7 when I was watching him essentially. So I never really thought of that's the model of hooker, because I didn't really watch hookers at all. But I understood, like, man, he's an awesome player, and I just love watching him. And then when I did, convert over, I mean, you just try to pick their brains when you're in that environment to really understand, like, everything they know, really. So,
and of course, knowing in Wellington Rugby circles last year, there was a bit of a problem at hooker, and of course, you got the call up to the Wellington Lions squad. And you got 10 minutes of fame in the Auckland semi-final. Tell us about running on for the Wellington Lions for the first time in a big match like that.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was, especially because I spent so long trying to get into those teams and so many barriers that did stop me from getting into those teams. I couldn't. I felt like that goal was keep getting pushed back. So that's why, I refer back to that time frame about not putting time frames on when you want to achieve things, because it puts that mental barrier. So for me personally, like, when I got out there, I just wanted to go enjoy it, because I've worked hard for it to get there, and I was grateful for the opportunity as well. So, but in saying that, like, it wasn't all me that actually helped me there. Like, there was a lot of people behind the scenes with Wellington Rugby, the Hurricanes Rugby, and just other former players who have been helping me to get to that position there, so which I wouldn't have been in. So and when I was there, I just wanted to take the opportunity really and soak it up.
And also that time, you've also been involved with the Hurricanes setup. You've actually played a few pre-season games over the years for the Hurricanes. Tell us about being part of that professional setup, and also the new facilities up there at Trentford at the new Sports Institute up there. That must be like a playground for you, that gymnasium, Josh, because the weights you do, you'll be in there all the time, wouldn't you?
Oh, mate, it's unreal. NZCIS, just down in Upper Hutt. So, yeah, it's a great setup. If you haven't seen it, I'd suggest checking it out. But, yeah, I can't speak highly enough of it. So the Lions and the Canes, and I think all the other teams like the Phoenix and stuff are in there. So, it's pretty good.
And so I've seen some of the facilities. Yeah, that big green room is, the amount of technology in there. I bet you've practiced doing your line-out throwing on that big TV screen there.
Yep, there's a couple throws been sent at that thing, but yeah, it's awesome, especially the reactive touchscreen. So yeah.
What else facilities do they have there? Because I've heard about the Watt Bike room. That's a pretty impressive setup. But tell us about some of the others facilities there.
Yeah, I think they've got just hot and colds. They've got like underwater treadmills, infrared sauna, cryotherapy chamber.
Oh, wow.
Uh, yeah, what else they got? Yeah, massive indoor green room, heaps of fields. Yeah, and then like the gym, which is massive. So yeah, it's awesome.
Now, outside of rugby, you run a very successful personal training rugby program called BPM Southall on Instagram. And we are just talking off here how you pretty much it takes up a lot of your time during the day. How did you come about this idea of running your own personal training program, and how has it got to the stage now that it's taken off and become very successful for you?
To be honest, when I was doing my personal training course, basically we had to do an Instagram just for an assignment. So I decided I just saw I had a Garmin watch on and it had BPM on there. And then I just saw my last name. I was like, Sal, sweet, that'll do. And then just paired the two together. And that's sort of where it formed just for the assessment. I just kept everything closed off while I was doing the assessment. And then pretty much just started posting some fitness stuff, which is probably way down in the bottom of it, which I haven't bothered to delete. And then there's, it's sort of just been growing organically since then. And I just try to help out a lot of younger boys and girls with the rugby knowledge that I know without stepping on their toes, because that's really important. That I'm just trying to share tips that is knowledgeable for everyone. So yeah, that's sort of why I did it. And then I thought I would do just a personal training thing as well to again help out the younger players, because I wish I had this going up through the ranks as well. So that's sort of why I want to just keep continuing to try give back to the wider rugby community, I suppose, although it's still building. But I'm really grateful and humbled with how it's gone so far. So yeah.
Social media, particularly Instagram, I'm still learning how to use it, but how do you manage that on top of trying to run your own program? Is there someone else that does your social media for you?
No. So I've learned everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've learned everything from video editing to graphic design to everything, building websites, everything. So it has taken a lot of time to do that. Just because, if you have one of those skills, it's pretty hard to become successful. But so for me personally, I just wanted to try gather as many skills as I possibly could, and try to stack them on top of each other, and hopefully it does well. And that's sort of how I've got it to that level, I suppose, was just learning new things.
What advice would you give to two particular candidates here? One who's aiming to be a professional rugby player at first 15 level, and a complete novice in terms of a gym program.
Yeah, I'd just say train hard. Yeah, in terms of if you're trying to go to first 15, I'd just say just train hard because there's a lot of natural talent in first 15 rugby, and if you work hard, I'm sure it'll pay dividends, as it did for me personally. And then if you haven't got any advice in terms of like being in a gym, then I would suggest just going out and seeking a personal trainer at one of your local gyms, and get them to correct your form, and then you can go from there. So yeah.
Rugby is ever changing around the rules of rugby, Josh. What is your thoughts on the new sternum rule on tackling? You played against Oris in pre-season last weekend.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of penalties for what is called high tackles. What's your thoughts on this new rule that is in domestic rugby in New Zealand this year?
Well, to be honest, it doesn't really bother me because I don't necessarily try put on the biggest hits. I'm sort of just like chop tackle, go for the next. So it doesn't personally affect me. However, I can see why they've done it, for the whole concussion risk side of things. But I don't really have much of a comment on that.
Do you think though is they should worry? I was talking to someone on Saturday while you guys were playing, and they suggested that maybe it should be the player arriving in later that should also be looked at too, in terms of height and tackle instead of just the initial tackler? What do you reckon?
I mean, when things happen at speed in rugby field, it's pretty hard to be able to control everything. So, but I mean, if you can try and minimize and reduce that risk, then sure. But I mean, it is pretty difficult.
And is there a law of rugby that you would like to change, that you would see as not being or brought back as another way?
No, mate.
Not the ruck. So last Saturday you had Oris won 5-2. Good physical battle. How's your ankle going? I presume it was only just a slight knock, but how's that all going?
Yeah, someone just landed on it. So it should be sweet. Yeah, it should be good to go.
Of course, the rematch of the Jubilee Cup this Saturday against Northern United. In what was pretty much an epic final last year. This year you've got them at home, round one. Always tricky round one. Norths have always been a pretty good rival for Petone. How is Petone prepping for this game against Northern United?
We're sort of just getting our structures and everything in place, and then just working on the combinations going into the weekend, because I understand, round one, sort of everyone's coming back together. So it's all about building that connection within the team. So for us, it's just about just nailing our role, essentially. So, and then trusting that the other person will do theirs. And that's sort of what we're thinking about going into the North game.
And what's the ambitions for Josh Southall for the rest of 2023?
Play some rugby.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, that's been a good goal every year so far. So, look, to be honest, I'm just keen to get out there, keep learning, and then whatever happens, again happens. But again, like, I am trying to, hit my straps as I go through the year. So, for sure.
Josh, it's been fantastic having you as our first guest for the year on the Huddy Hui. All the best on Saturday. We'll see you down there at Petone Rec.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Brad.
It's Josh Southall, hooker for Petone. Petone Norths this Saturday. That is the game that Huddy Sports and, of course, Petone Rugby Club were covering all their home games this season here on Huddy Sports. So that kicks off at 2:45. Coverage start just after 2:30 p.m. on Huddy Sports YouTube. Other games on this weekend: Marist St. Pat's versus Avalon, OBU versus Tawa, Oris, Wellington, Paniki, Johnsonville, Upper Hutt, Parramatta, Plympton, and Wainui versus Huddy Boys, Marist. So there are some pretty big first up games in round one of the Swindale Shield for 2023. Also, would like to thank our sponsors, of course, Louise Reddy, NZ Travel Brokers, Mike Pinfold, coming back on board again this year. Mind to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, at Huddy Sports. You can also, wanting to contribute to Huddy Sports this year, email huddysportsnz@gmail.com. And then later on, you'll be able to find this episode of the Huddy Hui, not only on YouTube, but you'll find it on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, and Apple Podcasts. Now, in the off-season, as well as redesigning this whole new studio, I came across this trophy here. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I've had a few suggestions. Maybe we could nominate each week the Rookie of the Year. That was a suggestion from Club Rugby. We could do our own Best and Fairest, since we don't know who the Best and Fairest are throughout the year, like we used to do in the old Dominion Post days. But if you've got a thought of what we could do with this trophy on the Huddy Hui and Huddy Sports this year, flick us a bell in the messages. We'll figure out something. But yeah, that's something we could do there for club rugby or secondary school rugby this year. So that's our first ever episode of the Huddy Hui. Many thanks to Josh Southall for coming on the show. Tune in to Huddy Sports YouTube on Saturday. Round one action: Petone versus Northern United at Petone Rec. Kick-off 2:45 p.m. We'll be live just before 2:30 on Huddy Sports YouTube. So many thanks for joining the Huddy Hui for our first episode this year. We'll see you Wednesday next week, 7 o'clock, for our second episode of the year. Ciao for now.